Does the thought of resistant weeds keep you awake all night long? Would you like herbicides to be a lower part of your budget every year? Or are you just a perfectionist like me and demand picture perfect fields all year long? Regardless of your reason, let's get to the field. I'll tell you exactly what we do, why we do it, and what it costs. All right, now there are three basic tenets to our weed control program that help us be extremely successful in controlling weeds. First rule of thumb is always start clean. Before you ever plant your first seed, you have a very wide range of options on weed control, so make sure you get that field good and clean before you ever put that first seed in the ground. Second one is that we utilize cultural methods in our weed control, mainly the use of cover crops, high biomass cover crops. A lot of our problem warm weather seeds actually require sunlight to hit the soil in order for those seeds to germinate. So if you can keep those seeds from ever germinating, you don't ever have to kill them. That's one reason why once the crop canopies like we got right here, you don't really have to worry about weed control anymore because there's no sunlight that's actually hitting the ground. That's where cover crops, high biomass cover crops, really come into play in preventing that sunlight from actually hitting the soil. But not only that, there's several cover crop species that have allelopathic effects on weeds. That means that these cover crops secrete a substance that actually prevent other weeds from germinating, specifically cereal rye. Cereal rye is awesome. You have a good stand of cereal rye out in your field, mare's tail, which has been a problem for years, no longer a problem. You won't hardly find them out there in your field. Cereal rye also has excellent allelopathic effects against pigweed, which is the main driver of all of our weed control decisions here in Tennessee. And the third basic tenet of our weed control program is absolute zero tolerance on letting any of our problem weeds go to seed. We do not want to build that soil weed bank. In fact, we're doing our best to actually reduce our seed weed bank to where we have fewer and fewer weeds to fight every year. Now we're located here in West Tennessee, and we've been battling chemical resistant weeds for many years. Started out with mare's tail. It's a winter annual. You kill it during your burn down. You generally don't have to worry about it after that, but that was the first weed that came along. And then about 2007, 2008, I believe, is when we first started seeing our first Roundup resistant pigweed, Palmer amaranth. It started a couple years earlier down in South Georgia and then quickly moved up our way. And we've been battling them for 15, 16, 17 years. And in that time, battling Palmer amaranth has probably constituted about 90% of my weed control decisions, what we actually do in the field, because it is the problem weed that we got. And we got several other weeds that are a problem. Italian ryegrass is resistant to a lot of chemistries. Johnson grass is a problem in our fields. I've heard that there's resistance to it. Ragweed can be a problem around the edges, but none of those hold a candle to Palmer amaranth. Now, speaking to that zero tolerance strategy, Palmer amaranth does have one big weakness. It's got very small and weak seed, and they do not survive long in the soil. So if you can keep your field clean of Palmer amaranth for between 3 to 5 years, you won't have to worry about having a bunch of Palmer amaranth germinate. The mortality of the seed generally does not last much past 3 years. I've seen it last out to about 5 years, but if you can keep your field weed free, then you've pretty much nipped Palmer amaranth in the bud, and all you're gonna have to do is just do maintenance, which is what we're doing right now, riding around our side-by-side, scouting and chopping or pulling up any stray pigweed that we see out here. Now today I want to cover our weed control options on 3 crops: soybeans, corn, and cotton. We'll start with soybeans. Soybeans probably cover more acres in the U.S. than any other any other crop. Now, because we use cover crops in our system, we generally don't do a spring burn down. We want the cover crops growing, accumulating as much biomass as possible. Our first chemical application in soybeans will actually be at planting. So right off the bat, we're already eliminating 1 trip across the field with herbicide, lowering costs. Now at planting, we will utilize paraquat to burn down the cover crop, and then we will also put out some residual chemicals. And this is kind of where we've evolved a little bit over the years. Used to, we would just use paraquat and zidua, which did good, but we found we could really enhance the zidua part of the chemistry if we added 1 more active ingredient to our mix: metribuzin. Now metribuzin by itself is not a very good residual herbicide, but when you add it to another product, say zidua or valor, it really enhances the control that the zidua provides and the length of control that the zidua provides. Now what we're doing is we're using 32 ounces of a generic paraquat to burn down. We're adding 5 ounces of metribuzin to that mix, and then we're going usually around 2 to 2.5 ounces of zidua or a product containing zidua. I know Anthem Max or Anthem Flex, one of them, has generally been a cheaper source of the zidua chemical over the past few years than what zidua by itself is. And then you also get the addition of cadet in there, which really doesn't offer that much, but it is a cheaper form of zidua. So that's what we'll use for our burn down. And then about when we get our first to second trifoliate on the plant, we want to make sure that we layer residuals so that we don't give any chance for weeds to break through in between our herbicide applications. Then on along about the second trifoliate, we come in with our post-emerge application, and this will apply 32 ounces of Roundup and 32 ounces of prefix. Now that might be a little early on the post-emerge, but we want to make sure that we layer those residuals. We apply another one before the first one runs out, so we don't have any kind of gap there where weeds have a chance to germinate. And prefix is a mixture of dual and reflex. And the combination of the zidua metribuzin and then the dual reflex will generally keep our fields completely weed-free for the rest of the season. At most, we might have a few escapes that we have to come in and manually remove late season, which is what I'm doing now, driving around and scouting and getting and manually removing any kind of escapes that we might have. But for the most part, that has been absolutely lights out for our full season soybeans. Something else that can really aid you in soybean weed control is to plant your soybeans as early as possible. Soybeans will generally tolerate pretty cool soils, and that gives your soybeans an opportunity to go ahead and germinate before your warm weather weeds will typically germinate, so you can kind of get a jump start to get that soybean growing ahead of the other weeds. That will lead to canopying a little bit earlier, which will then provide you your better weed control later on in season. Now if you wait till later in the season when it's a lot warmer, you know, while your soybeans are germinating, you're also having to battle your weeds germinating too. So if you can get a week or 2 jump on there, that just really helps enhance your weed control. Now some other options in your soybeans is instead of Roundup, going across the top with Liberty, but typically any kind of weeds that emerged during that time are grasses, and Liberty is going to be weaker on grasses than what Roundup is. Another thing to think about when you're doing your burn down, I know a lot of people don't like to use it, but paraquat is a wonderful tool. As I said earlier, Italian ryegrass is another problem in our area, especially around the edges. It starts around the edges, and then gradually, as you don't control it, it will creep on into the middle of the field. but burning down with Roundup is not going to help resistant Italian ryegrass, but that paraquat, especially with the addition of the metribuzin, because the metribuzin actually slows down the activity of the paraquat and actually helps a paraquat give a better kill, because then it has a chance to be translocated within the plant a little bit better. And that works really, really well on resistant Italian ryegrass. Now, on our fields, we don't have a problem with Italian ryegrass. I think mainly because of our cover crop, and I have annual ryegrass in the mix, which I think helps control the resistant Italian ryegrass. So you would think that if we're planting ryegrass, we would have a problem with ryegrass as a weed, but in fact, that has absolutely not been the case, especially in our wheat crop. You would think that's where you really see ryegrass be a problem, is in our wheat crop. We have absolutely zero ryegrass in our wheat crop, so I think we're really getting a lot of benefit from controlling the Italian ryegrass from our cover crop. Now, our double crop soybeans is going to be a little bit different. Of course, double crop soybeans are going to be planted a lot later than what our full season beans are, but generally the weed control program is the same. After the wheat is cut, we're immediately getting in there and planting our soybeans to try and get them going. We have generally a pretty good amount of biomass in the wheat in there laying on the ground that will help suppress weeds, but immediately after planting, we'll go in just like we did with our full season beans with paraquat and metribuzin, but instead of using Zidril, we're trying to lower our weed control cost a little bit, and we put Valor in the mix. Now, I think Valor could be a viable option for your full season beans. It just seems like Zidril holds out a little bit longer than what Valor does, even though I think Valor might give a little bit better control over what Zidril does. I'm a big fan of Valor, but anyway, it's definitely a cheaper option than what Zidril is, and the normal rate on Valor would be 2 ounces per acre, but considering that it's gotten pretty cheap, we're going out there with either 2.5 or 3 ounces per acre just to try and give us a little bit longer weed control, and it's worked out very well for us. But that's how our double crop program differs just a little bit than what our full season program does. All right, now that we covered soybeans, I'm gonna carry you to the cornfield and tell you what we do in the cornfield. All right, next spot on the list is corn. Now right here, we're standing in the middle of one of our cornfields, one of the really a lot thinner spots of the field where we don't have real good soil, mainly because I want to show you how well these chemicals work even under less than ideal conditions. We all know chemicals can work really well under very ideal conditions. If I were to take you to a spot where the corn was a lot taller, a lot thicker, and a lot greener, you know, obviously we're going to have a lot better weed control. But I want to show you some little bit shorter corn, some thinner corn that's allowing more sunlight to hit the ground, and show you that we still got very, very good weed control in our corn crop. Now again, as in our other crops, cover crops is our base weed control, and as you can tell, we still got a fair amount of residue down here. Now, a vast majority of the residue has already decomposed, especially with the amount of nitrogen that we put on our crop. You know, that's going to help decompose the residue a lot quicker than, say, it will in soybeans or cotton. But looking down through here, I mean, we can still get some light down through the canopy, but you know, we're just now starting to see a flush of young weeds coming up. But of course, these are definitely not going to affect yield at all. The only thing they're going to do is, if you know they survive and produce seed, they will add to the weed bank, and that's why I'm walking through my corn crop with my trusty hoe, scouting for any potential pigweed escapes. Now obviously that's the big problem with weed control in corn. We can't just ride around the edges and look over the top to see any pigweeds popping up, so getting escapes in our corn crop has been a very serious concern for us. But what I do is I go to areas of the field where I've seen pigweeds in the past and make sure that those areas are clean, because that's where they're most likely to be, and that has really helped slow the spread of pigweed across our farm. But starting out with weed control, other than the cover crop, we don't do any burn down in the spring. We do our burn down at planting to allow maximum biomass of the cover crop to accumulate. And then we come in with one active ingredient whenever we plant. paraquat. That's to pretty much fry the cover crop. What we're wanting to do, and the reason we're not putting down any kind of pre-emerge there is because we want to save all of our pre-emerge according to label. We want to save it for our post-emerge so we get as long of weed control as possible, because we're kind of limited in height on when we can apply some of these herbicides, and we want them to last as long as possible. Plus, we're planting corn earlier. Weeds are generally not a problem. Our summer annuals, they hadn't started germinating yet. And also we have a lot more post-emerge control options for weeds that already emerged in corn than what we do soybeans and cotton. So paraquat is what we use at burn down on planting with no pre-emerge. And then once the corn is germinated, once it gets to about the V3, V4 stage, we want to do it before V5. We come in with Roundup, Rim Q, and atrazine. 32 ounces of Roundup. Rim Q is 4 ounces an acre, and we come in with atrazine at, I believe, is 48 ounces per acre, which I think is about that's about the maximum you can apply at one time according to the label. It is possible to apply more atrazine, maybe include some with your burn down. Atrazine, being a triazine, will allow your gramoxone to work a little bit better, but we've been able to control our weeds just fine doing it this way. Now, another option in corn that we've used in the past and we were very pleased with was, instead of Rim Q, we would use Halex GT. But the reason I went away from that is that it's got a very high use rate, around 54 ounces per acre. So obviously it's a lot easier to handle and manage the Rim Q. Also, the grass control part of Halex GT is metolachlor or dual. We're already utilizing that chemistry with soybeans. The Rim Q has Rim sulfuron in it to control your grasses, so it's getting another different active ingredient out there, and we're rotating our chemistries and helping try to mitigate more weed resistance. And I actually believe that the Rim sulfuron is a better grass herbicide, residual herbicide, than what the dual part of the Halex GT is. And that's pretty much going to comprise our weed control our weed control in corn. But again, for us, that zero tolerance policy is extremely important. If we don't scout our known problem areas in our corn and we let a few pigweed go to seed, we're basically resetting that clock again of 3 to 5 years of having to control weeds before you are weed free of pigweed. And since our rotation is corn once every 3 years, you're never going to eliminate pigweed in your field, and you're always going to have that problem. So even though it's most definitely not fun, it's hot, humid in this canopy, I'm getting scraped by these sharp corn leaves and everything, it's very important to do as good of a job of scouting and manually removing any escapes in our corn crop as possible. Otherwise, we're going to have a mess in our subsequent cotton crop and then our soybean crop after that. So perhaps the most important part of our weed control policy is still having a zero tolerance policy and doing whatever it takes to make sure we don't let a single pigweed in our field go to seed. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, but it is worth it. Now, that being said, we're not going to get all the pigweeds out here because I cannot afford to walk down every single row and put eyes on it. But what I found, for the most part, if you go to your known problem areas and make sure there's none there, for the most part, you will do an excellent job of lowering your weed seed bank in your fields. Again, like I said before, there's no 100% surefire way to control weeds in your field, but you take the time, the effort, and make sure you use all the proper tools. It's possible to get excellent weed control, and it's possible to get sustainable weed control that will last year after year. This is one of the problem areas we've had in past, and I'm not seeing any pigweed here. I am seeing some sprayer blight from when we sprayed fungicide on our corn, but other than that, I'm not seeing any pigweeds in this spot. So if I don't have any pigweeds in this spot this year, there's a dang good chance I'm not going to have any pigweeds in this spot when I plant cotton next year. So maybe this problem area, we finally eradicated all the seed in the seed bank, and maybe I won't have to worry about this spot in future years. So I put eyes on this spot. I'm gonna hop on my side by side and scout a few more spots. All right, I just wanted to show you that yes, we can grow good looking corn, and the weed control is very good in the good looking corn. Also, it's been hot and dry here, and lost a lot of nitrogen this from May rains. That's kind of why that corn's starting to fire up. But overall, like I said, we're here for weed control. We're not here for corn agronomy, and right now, seeing excellent weed control. All right, in this spot here on the inrows, I did find one pigweed. And if I hadn't scouted this spot, this sucker would go to seed and produce a bunch of seed that I'd be fighting for quite a few years. So I'm not gonna have to worry about those seeds anymore. Oh, and one last thing to mention on our weed control and our corn. After we come in here and combine this, right behind the combine, we will then come in and spray paraquat, because there will be some weed escapes, there will be some pigweed escapes, and our hope is that maybe, you know, if they just now germinating this time, by the time we come in here and combine, they won't quite have mature seed yet, and then we'll go ahead and wipe them out yet. I know some of them will already go to seed, but I think that's another practice that has helped us keep our seed bank low of pigweed seeds. And if you don't want to spend the time scouting your walking through your fields, the best thing you can do other than that is controlling pigweeds around the edges of your fields. So you see this is a female, it's going to seed, and all it takes is one deer, any kind of animal walking through here, brushing up against that, walking your cornfield, and it's been deposited in your field. So at the absolute very minimum, control the resistant weeds around the edges of your fields. That will help out quite a bit. All right, enough talking about corn. Let's move on to cotton. All right, the last crop we're going to talk about weed control is cotton. Now, for several different reasons, cotton is the most problematic crop to try and control weeds in. For one thing, we're planting on 38-inch rows, wide rows, as you can see behind me, so it definitely takes cotton a lot longer to canopy. Plus, we're putting out fewer seeds per acre than, say, soybeans. We're only putting out 37,000 seeds per acre, so you got fewer plants out here that really have to grow and branch out in order to be able to lap the middles, provide shade to keep weed control down. Now, we're here in late July, as you can see, you can still see down the mills, there's still sunlight getting down, so you know, weed control is definitely more difficult in cotton than what it is beans and corn. We also have probably a little bit fewer herbicide options in cotton than we do soybeans and corn, especially over the top residuals that we can apply to help keep weeds from coming up. We've definitely got more options in corn and beans than what we do cotton. Now, it's taken me a few years to kind of figure out the best system for us, but it does require several tools. As in corn and soybeans, you know, cover crops provides our base weed control. We still got a really good mat of cover crop down here that's blocking sunlight from hitting the soil, that is really helping in weed control. Again, cover crops by themselves are not going to give you 100% weed control, but the more biomass you can get, especially grasses that's going to persist longer into the growing season, the more that it will aid your weed control and take the pressure off your herbicides. Now, just like with corn and soybeans, we don't do any kind of burn down in the spring. We've got our cover crops growing. We want them growing maximum biomass. Other than the burn down strips we do that we will plant back into, our first herbicide application will be at planting, when we're then ready to terminate the cover crop. And when we come in at planting, we're coming in with paraquat, just like in corn and soybeans, but we're also coming back with brake herbicide, which is a very good, very long-lasting residual herbicide. However, brake does require quite a bit of rainfall to get it activated, and then also in our thick cover crops, I'm not really sure we're getting the full activity of brake. I think a lot of it's getting tied up in the residue and not getting down to the soil. It's a very expensive herbicide at over $20 an acre, and that may be something I may be making a change going forward in future years, maybe going back to Caparol or Cotaran as a residual at planting. Those herbicides definitely don't don't last as long, but I think they might be a little bit better about getting down through the cover crop residue, getting in the soil and providing weed control. We're kind of seeing hit or miss activity on the brake herbicide. Now, a few weeks after planting, that's when we start doing post-emerge herbicide applications. Our primary goal 2 to 3 weeks after planting is to finish off any cover crop that was not fully terminated during the rolling crimping and the burn down at planting. Typically we'll come in with Roundup, throw in some bug juice for thrips or whatever, and then a couple weeks after that, generally we got some grasses, especially around the edges coming up. This year we kind of switched things up a little bit. We went with Liberty and Clethodim instead of just Roundup, just trying to mix up the chemistries a little bit. And that Liberty and Clethodim, about 4 to 5 weeks after planting, really helped provide really good weed control. Any small pigweeds we had out here, really wiped them up, did a good job of controlling the grasses. At that time, there are a couple of the over-the-top herbicides, but you really kind of run the risk of damaging your cotton and really slowing down the growth. And as far north as we are in the cotton growing region, we really don't have a lot of leeway on slowing our crop down. But any product containing metolachlor or acetylachlor, you know, your duals, your outlooks, sequence, you know, products like that, those are an option to get another layer of residual herbicide over the top. I used to use that in the past, but I just really didn't like how it dinged my cotton up and slowed my cotton down. So for the last couple of years, I really kind of shied away from those products. I have noticed less grass weed control once we started taking dual out of the mix, but on the other hand, our cotton doesn't struggle as much early season either, so it's kind of a trade-off. But the one thing that we do after that most cotton producers don't do anymore is right there around the 1st of July, we will then bring our hooded sprayer out, and then we will do our final lay-by herbicide application. And what the hooded sprayer does is you got hoods on a toolbar that go down the middle of the row, and it's spraying up under the hoods, and the hoods are keeping the herbicide off the cotton. We also got tips that are spraying up under the row to get any small weeds up under the row, but keeping it off the cotton plant itself. And what that allows us to do is use a very wide variety of herbicides that we can't spray over the top that really help with troublesome weed control. Now, for the last few years, the mixture I've been running in under the hoods has been Liberty and a very stiff rate of Valor, 3 ounces acre of Valor. Valor's gotten pretty cheap. I'm a big fan of Valor. As long as you can get a rainfall to get it incorporated, your weed control the rest of the year is pretty much going to be lights out. I'm a really big fan of it. But then after all that, you should have really good weed control in your cotton, but it's still not going to be 100% perfect. And just like I've been preaching on the other crops, zero tolerance is something that we practice, something that we believe in, something we've been doing for 15 to 16 years now. So pretty much all season long, from mid-July until around the first part of September, heck, even middle way through September, we got our side-by-side out. We're going around the edges of the fields. We're scouting for pigweeds. Any problem areas that I know I've seen pigweeds in the past, we visit every single one of those. And of course, riding around the edges, scouting out new locations also. And then we got our tank on the back filled with Liberty. Liberty will kill really big pigweeds, but you got to soak them real good. I also got our trusty hoe right here. Definitely not scared to pull it out and use it. But in all of this, you're probably thinking, well, you're leaving a few tools in the toolbox. Why are you not utilizing dicamba or 2,4-D in your crops? I mean, are you not planting tolerant crops? Yes, I am. This field right here is Extend cotton. However, over the years, you know, I've seen a lot of problems with the dicamba formulation. Hot, humid, regardless of what Bayer says, the chemical can volatilize after application. Even if you do everything right during application, it can volatilize, and then air currents carry it over to susceptible crops, somebody's garden, somebody's grapevines, you know, somebody that's got enlist crops, you know, all that kind of stuff. I know a lot of farmers do it, but I said a long time ago, I'm not going to do it. I don't want that risk. I don't want there to be any proof that I even bought it. And then not only that, Last couple of years, dicamba and even 2,4-D has not been very hot on pigweeds. You know, University of Tennessee tests have shown that probably, I think around 50% of the population is now resistant to dicamba. So I definitely don't want the risk of applying it and then having a subpar result on top of that. But it really doesn't matter, because we can still control pigweeds using the methods that I just described and had really good success. It just takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. But if you practice that zero tolerance, not letting a single pigweed go to seed, you can keep your fields manageable. Now, you're not going to completely eradicate pigweed, because I know in this area we got a ton of wildlife off in these woods. They're in my neighbor's field across the tree line. He's probably got a few pigweed. They're going through his field, they're grabbing seeds, they're bringing over to my field, whether it be deer, birds, raccoons, I mean whatnot. I'm a big believer that wildlife is carrying a lot. Wildlife is carrying a lot of these seeds. That's why every year I'm seeing a few pigweeds pop up in places where I've never had pigweed before. So anyway, guys, that's how we control weeds on our farm. We've been very successful at it. It does require a lot of work. It requires a lot of vigilance, requires a lot of scouting, requires a lot of effort, but in general, I'll put our weed control method up against anybody else's as far as terms of being success, and also lower cost. Not low cost, but lower cost than what I think the average farmer in this area spends on herbicides. And then not only that, a lot of these resistant weeds that we have problems with and have had problems with for many years, we're kind of keeping them at bay. They're not winning the battle, not yet. They might in the future, but right now they're not. We're able to keep them at bay and keep them manageable to where the problem just doesn't blow up and spread all across our farm. Well, guys, hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. Hope you found it helpful. Now, if there's anything you disagree with or something you do different that you really like on your farm, be sure to leave it down in the comments below. I don't profess to know everything. I just know what's been successful for us. But if you got a better way of doing it, let me know in the comments below. I'd be interested to see, you know, if it might possibly work for me and making it a little bit easier on our weed control, or even lowering the cost a little bit more. Guys, appreciate y'all watching. We'll see you in the next one.